I'm Sean.
And I'm Erika.
And today we're going to be discussing Bible study methods. Now, this is the first video in a whole series of these. And what is so cool about this is we've changed the format a little. So we're going to try not to make this stodgy and stiff like the other videos. Not they're bad, but less formal. Right? So with this, the whole purpose is that we want to share with all of you our methods for studying the Bible. Now, these are formally taught in college, usually as exegesis and then as hermeneutics. Make sense so far? I know you know all this already.
I think so.
Okay.
And I think the one we took was actually called Bible study method, no?
Well, one of the
if
ones
I remember
we took.
Right.
Yeah, so one of them we took was Bible study methods, and we actually used, and I don't have...
Textbooks?
I'm using the textbook to hold up a camera right now. So it's two,
this
we're shooting with two
one,
cameras,
so,
but this
yes.
is the...
Sean and I have been reading this review now, right?
Yeah.
What did you think?
I like it.
Read it?
I like Dr.
Recommend?
Hendricks. He taught, the professor who taught us this course at Dallas Theological was Dr. Chris Atkins. I think, well, mine I had a PhD, but Professor Chris Atkins. And he's
awesome.
Passed away a few years
process.
ago.
It's so cool.
Yeah, it was great. He was an awesome professor.
So good to all of us.
Yeah. And, I mean, just an awesome guy, and he was perfect for that class.
Mm-hmm.
He taught us, we had Romans with him too, a few other courses. I think we had some Theology 1 and 2 and Doctrines, a bunch of courses with the guy. It was just, Bible colleges are like that. Usually if you're a professor teaching at one, you're teaching multiple subjects in the undergrad studies. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I love the course. Getting back on topic, sorry. I think for me, what did you take away from the I guess the book overall?
Living by the book?
Yeah, what would you say? It's Living by the Book by Howard Hendricks, and I think his son actually might have worked on it with him. Yeah, William.
I think so. And I read the revised version, not the first one. So it was nice. It's talking about like podcast and all the latest stuff, because first one was older, right?
Yeah.
But what did I get out? Really back to basic. Things that make sense, things practical, things that you can get started right away. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I think so. And I think for me, what would you say, if you had to summarize all of the techniques, what do you think the main technique or the main area or the main idea?
I summarize it?
Yeah, and just like one word. That's going to be tough, but I've got one in mind. Observation, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so don't just skim over it. Don't assume you know it. There's always something new you can get out of into this and get out of. So I think it's interesting, exciting too.
And that is the thrust of what we're going to be covering, is observation. Now I'm going to break down the different areas in just a second here for this first video. We're not going to get as detail oriented into it, because you have to. That's just like the first day of any college class. You're going to get the syllabus, the scope of the course, if you will, the locus, what you're covering and all of that. So that's most of what this video is going to be. But in that, you don't shut the video off. Pay attention, because if you miss this, nothing else is going to make sense. If you pick up other resources, many of which I can recommend to you now on interpretation methods. This one is great by Roy Zuck, who actually also taught. I don't have the dust jacket for this. I hate dust jackets, so I tend to get rid of them. Yeah, and this book on exegesis by Gordon Fee, as well as I have one more by, it's the bottom one there.
Bottom one? Oh, right.
This one's a great one. I absolutely like Craig Blomberg, and this one's done by him and Jennifer Markley, and it's a handbook on exegesis. Now,
available on Amazon, right? So
Amazon.
why don't we put the link for viewers?
Good idea, I'll do that.
I actually get audiobook from local library, and it's been awesome for me, because I cannot always dedicate my time sitting as much as I want to and opening a book, so I do housework and listen to audiobook, which I got from local library, so you can do that too. Or if you want to read e-version. So
yeah, and she's the brains of this operation, guys. Don't think for a second that we've both been to college. We're both going back to college, hopefully to get our PhDs. Yeah, it's a long process. And so, don't think for a second that because I've got pastor in front of my name that that means I'm the only one studying. We do a lot of our study together, which is why we're doing these videos together, because she's got just as much good input, and in my opinion, more than I do. One thing I do want to mention real quick, I keep forgetting, is the difference between exegesis, which is the primary thrust, as I said earlier, I think, of what we're doing, and hermeneutics. In the simplest way to describe the two, exegesis deals with the text itself, and hermeneutics is sort of the different exegetical methods, if you will. It's going to deal with sort of the idea of why we're doing the exegesis in the first place, the rules of it, and focusing on that, where exegesis is the down and dirty, getting in the mud. Okay, the Bible's not mud, that's a horrible illustration. Getting in the Word and really, digging getting in the dirt, let's say that, and digging that gold out, right, if you want to think of it that way. Yeah, so that's really what exegesis is, and that's what the Bible study methods are. So that's, the two are the same. Sometimes people use Bible study methods as a term to sort of bring it down to the everyman level, if that makes sense. I don't want to say dumb it down, because I don't think that's the intent at all.
Yeah, but it's scary to hear.
Yeah, exegesis.
Yeah, what are you doing to Jesus? I think many people think.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with
Jesus. Did you think that?
Yeah. And there's going to be some things to avoid with exegesis, like eisegesis, which instead of drawing things out of the Word is imposing things into the text.
I remember a friend. You're having discussion with this person, and you say, "Wait, you doing the eisegesis?" And he said, "That's exactly what I mean. That's what I'm doing."
Yeah.
But if you don't understand this terminology, please don't be shy, because it's not everyday words.
Yeah, and eisegesis is actually not a good thing. It's taking a view and sort of interpreting the Bible by that lens, and so you need to be real careful of that. And I don't know if it's the same friend you're thinking of that said that.
Do you remember that? Yeah.
You talking about the recent one?
Yeah, recently happened.
Yeah, and he's like, yeah, that's exactly right. You have to view the whole Bible with my lens. And I went, that's not good.
He didn't know what that meant, and that's why he...
No, he didn't.
He did, right? But my point is not to embarrass this friend, but it's common that people don't know. And I guess another point is that don't pretend to know, because it's...
Yeah, definitely. You get yourself in a lot of trouble doing that. And I see that often online. People represent themselves, whether it's Christians or atheists or whatever, your religious or non-religious affiliation is, that people will either by the language they're trying to use or by certain terminology try to represent themselves as being an authority in that area. And you can tell they generally don't have the what am I trying to say, the background for it, in that you can use vocabulary, but that doesn't make you... let me do it this way. I can name parts of the body, vocabulary and different functions, and start talking about, a sucking chest wound, you can deal with that with a chest decompression needle, 14 gauge, and put it between the first and second intercostal spacing. That doesn't make me a doctor. All right, I had some medical training in the Army, trauma and triage stuff, so I can treat that kind of stuff, but it doesn't make me an MD. And so, but what's the point? I can easily go into a doctor's office, start using that language, and they often, when we're in there, and you learn, they go, "Oh, are you a doctor?" I go, "No, I'm sorry, I'm."
They said that to me too.
Yeah.
Funny.
So.
Yeah, but that's what this is for, right? To prepare everybody so they can understand all this stuff.
Yeah, which now on the flip side, we don't want to scare you either into thinking, "Oh man, I can't do Bible study," right? Because, like a scholar, no, when you're done doing this course with us, I think it will help you to be able to look at the passage the same way pastors, preachers, theologians, people with PhDs do it. You're going to have their methods. If you stick to them, in theory, you can exegete a passage just as well as anyone else. The school where you graduated from and nothing about you personally or anyone else makes them a good exegete. It's just simply following the rules and the tricks of the trade, so to speak. So hopefully that sort of helps you. Sorry for those of you seeing this on this camera. If I look down over here, I have another camera over here.
Yeah,
so that's why I'm doing
something
that.
New. And on the other side, that you don't have to necessarily have all this education for you to get started, right?
Yeah.
We really getting great information from the Bible, which you never got from any of your Bible study before, because you're doing it yourself.
That's right. And age, gender, none of that matters. You'd be 12
Yeah.
doing this. Our kids, we're teaching it to them. So it really doesn't matter. So let's kind of dive into it. So the overview of this from here on out, I still don't have a catchy name for it yet.
You mean for this series?
Yeah, for the series. But being former military, one of the big things that we talk about a lot is really situational awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll hear that situational awareness is just ingrained in you constantly. And I was in an infantry unit, so I was in the thick of combat. I signed up right after September 11th. September 12th of 2001, I was in the recruiter's office. We had a lengthy conversation that September 11th, that evening. And because here I am in my third year of Bible college and, talking about leaving that and going into the military. So that gets drilled into you in the military,
Mm-hmm.
this idea of situational awareness. And it's important because it saves your life if you're paying attention to the things going on around you. But sometimes if you don't have a good instructor, it's just pay attention. Well, pay attention to what? Well, pay attention to things around you. Mm. Well, what things around me? Or
what to look for.
Right.
You have to.
Right. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, so you really need to know what you're looking
Yeah.
for. I often, when I teach situational awareness, and I've had the honor of doing that at some very large defense contractors for some of their groups, and I hear people, when I ask this question, well, what is situational awareness? What do you think the number one answer is that I get?
Situational awareness. Sorry, I was thinking about microphone because it was hitting the table a little bit.
Okay.
Let me move that first, okay?
All right. So
because I think it might.
I'll handle that. You answer the question.
Okay. Situation awareness. What would people think of that?
What do you think they'd say is the answer? What do you think they'd give as an answer? The number one answer you
Let
think
me
they'd
guess.
give?
Situation.
So if I said, being situationally aware, when I'm teaching that, keep in mind I'm teaching law enforcement, military contractors, civilians who want to,
I don't know what they would say. What they have
So
this?
oftentimes they get their idea of situational awareness from the movies. So I think it conjures up ideas of Jason Bourne in the first Matt Damon's character.
You gotta be kidding. I was wondering, but I didn't think that actually will be the.
No, so what they say, they don't say Jason Bourne, but
They connect that.
They go, well, I can tell you where the exits are, and I can tell you what, the vehicle where the gun's going to be, and they think that's
Power of media for ya.
Yeah, well, it is.
Yeah.
And those things are part of situational awareness on some level, but if that's all you're looking for, you're going to miss it.
Do they kind of feel like, I know this?
Yeah.
I do this all the time. I don't need any lesson from you, Mr. Professional person.
And then I ask them, if we're in a building that has stairs, I'll ask them, how many stairs did you come up before you got in here? They don't know. I said, well, how many exits are in this building? How many do you have? If I'm thinking of the contracting building I went to, between the first checkpoint where the security is and this room, not just where are the exits in this room, where are the exits in the building.
Right.
Were there any smells and sounds that were different than when you're operating normally?
Yes. Now, many of these things is something you do every day. So it just becomes your routine and you don't pay attention, right?
Yeah.
And I suppose that's just normal habit to not pay attention to some of the things so you can process.
Right.
Yeah.
And with situational awareness, how does that cross over? I know you're wondering, okay, Sean, I get it. Maybe I want to hear more about this, but what does that have to do with Bible study? If you haven't connected the two, it is you're taking that sort of level of awareness over into Bible study. Now, I'm not giving you the checklist of what I teach on situational awareness because that's not what this is about. But I am going to give you some of the methods and I'm going to use some of the same terminology. So when you're done, you're going to understand this from my point of view, keeping in mind that I will try as best I can to share with you what most exegetes, the way they do it, their process versus mine, so that you're not confused that when I get done and you pick up one of these books I recommended and go, well, wait a minute, this doesn't look like what Sean was talking about. The order is different or some of the terms are different. You'll understand why. So I'll try to give you both. And if I don't, please remember to ask and, we'll go from there or comment. Again, if you're watching this on Logos, Logos has an awesome video series on this, taught at the college level. New Testament exegesis, I think, or interpretation methods. I can't remember. I'll try to put a name in the description. On YouTube, please leave comments, ask questions, wherever you're watching this. If you've got that ability, we'd love to hear from you because it makes the teaching better as we go. So without further ado, let me get in and sort of explain my methodology, and that is, I think of everything from a big picture and then narrowed that down. And situational awareness in a combat environment is the same. When you get into a new environment, or as a civilian, a first responder, the first thing you're looking for are sights, smells, and sounds on the big picture of that entire environment. All right, anything that is not just your immediate area, but if I go into Walmart, it's all of Walmart. All right, and I'm picking Walmart as opposed to a small convenience store because I don't want the size necessarily to matter. Outdoors gets a little bit trickier, which I can explain later, but for now, again, that's not the purpose. So just the large area, and then what we do when we teach situational awareness is move all the way down to the body language of individuals that are in our immediate area, anyone that can reach out and touch me. And there are ways to filter out any behaviors that don't fit, that will help me to zero in on people that I need to watch. So that's a behavioral analysis. So that's kind of combined in my situational awareness courses. And you can take that same idea and move it over into the Bible text, and you're going to get a lot out of it. Now, one of the methods that the military teaches for deciding whether or not to engage, this was, I think, developed in Vietnam War for fighter pilots, was what we call the, I think it was ACOCA, if I remember correctly. No, I'm sorry, it's the OODA loop. I apologize. ACOCA is something different. All that military stuff jammed in my head. So observe, orient, decide, and act is the OODA loop, and it's actually very basic. So observe, literally, you're for a fighter pilot, they're flying along in their aircraft, and they're just observing whatever that flight path is, and they're observing anything that comes along in their AO, their area of operation, if you will. All right, so it's just a general area, and then so they're observing, and then orient. All of a sudden, they've got a bogey, whether it's coming up on their radar, they've got a target, whatever you want to call it, and now this person who's entered into their environment, they have to now orient to that and shift their focus onto, okay, here is an individual, are they a threat or not? So observe, orient, that's where then decide comes in. You can see, okay, am I engaging? What are the rules of engagement?
Okay.
What am I doing with this individual? And then act. Either, if you've decided they are a threat, act. What they found in teaching the pilots this was, by drilling it into them, believe it or not, it seems so dumb and simple, yet it became second nature where they weren't thinking about it. And as soon as that process becomes natural, and it's not, mechanical, where you're having to, step one, step two.
You're doing it.
You're just doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So we're taking that exact model, and I'm going to import all of the exegesis steps into that model. So observe. So I'll read for you the list of the things that I do, and then I'll explain why I do them this way. So for observe, I do text criticism, identifying my literary forms, and part of my context in that section. Now, for those of you that have done exegesis, that probably won't sound too terribly different, except for context. Generally, that comes later in the process. But for me, and I'll explain as we go through why I do it this way. Because remember, I'm going from big to smaller. And so text criticism, for those of you that don't know, is generally the idea of sort of trying to establish the original text as best as possible. Now, different Greek New Testaments, which is why I've got this one. This is a Nestle-Aland I think it's an NA28. Yeah. Have text critical devices on the bottom, and you probably won't be able to see this. I'll try to maybe put a clip of it. But down on the bottom here, on that camera you can see it, you've got all this paragraph is actually the text apparatus stuff. So it's telling you what the different variations are in the reading. If there is a variation, I'm trying to remember the NA28's apparatus, how it works,
just talking
and the different
about this, Ari, I remember.
and the different manuscripts,
Right,
right?
right.
Now, I'm thinking of the United Bible Society UBS 5's apparatus is that they also give a grading, A, B, C, or D,
right.
as to how well they grade that. So those apparatuses for those doing text criticism, and it's not a negative thing, folks. For years as a fundamentalist, I'm not anymore, but that was taught to us that means you're criticizing the Bible, and that's not what you're doing. You're just trying to get to the heart of what the manuscripts say. But you're saying, wait a minute, Sean, I thought you said this was going to be, easy for the working guy. that's not how we're going to be doing our text criticism. All right, we're going to be doing it slightly different. I'm not going to give away what we're going to be doing, but there is a way for us to do it at an everyman level. You don't need any Greek, and in fact, to be honest, anyone who's studied text criticism, when I talk about what we're going to be doing, is probably going to say, that's not text criticism, and that's fine. Because anyone normally who teaches Bible study methods excludes this process entirely. So they don't even do it because they're assuming the person getting a Bible study method, training doesn't have any Greek.
Right.
So for you, you don't have to worry about this. If you don't have Greek, then it doesn't matter. If you do have Greek training, I probably won't cover a lot of this because you already should know how to do text criticism then, but by default from your Greek training. So then literary form is going to be identifying the genre. That's what I'm looking for there, because that's going to tell us how to interpret that. If we're looking at a piece of poetry, that's fundamentally different from, how you would interpret it from wisdom literature or from narrative or whatever. So each one of these are different, and we have to interpret them according to that way. And then, so genre and literary context itself, and let me see what I put here in my notes. Getting old, folks. Well, no, not yet. No. I was looking at this. Oh, establishing what the rules for the literature are, yep. And understand the role the passage plays. I'm not going to get into too much detail. And then context. Yes, now this context, I'm thinking big picture. So what do I mean by that? In this context, I'm thinking, and if you have any questions, please interrupt me at any point. Or if you think that you have a question, the viewers, it might help them. So context here, I'm thinking very big picture. So what do I mean by that? Who wrote the book or letter?
That's what I was about to ask you. Where does the author come in? Is it the house? Okay, I'm glad you just
this context, right?
That. Okay, authors.
Yeah, and this is the large context here. I want the author. I want to know who wrote it, who's receiving it,
right?
What the occasion was for the writing. Why is it being written? I also want a little bit between. This sort of goes back to the literary form in my mind. And the context is I want to know how this book is being outlined. There's a great resource for this. Is it the Bible Society? What is that? We have the giant coffee table book.
Bible Project?
Bible Project, thank you.
See.
It's awesome. So the Bible Project is an awesome resource for those of you that don't know. It's not just entertainment, but they outline every book of the Bible and they do other studies. That is a great resource. We actually have their physical print book.
Yes, it's awesome. But they have YouTube, right?
Yeah, they have YouTube videos.
Which our children love it. They just watch it all day long once. So
yeah.
I think you love it too.
Yeah, they go nuts over it. So and I was surprised. One day they saw me watching it, or Erika and I were watching it in their study. And
you just hung around.
Yeah, they were hanging around. I said, "Why don't I turn this on for you downstairs?" They said, "Yeah." So I turned it on and went, and I think I had to go grocery shopping later on. So I was leaving the house, going downstairs to get some things. Like this is 2 or 3 hours later, they're still watching it.
So they are great in summarizing. Like they will summarize this book has 5 different parts, or it was written from this person to that person. So they are really great at explaining that.
Yeah, so they've done most of your work for you in the context, at least in that part. Now you're thinking, oh great, I got everything I need to know about context. No, we just scratched the surface on that one. But it is a fantastic resource, and I'll try to put a link to that. Hopefully, I don't think they'll mind that. And so that can give you the chapter divisions and also an idea of the main themes that are going on, which is extremely important. Now some exegetes are going to say, man, Sean, you're backwards. This comes much later on in the process. The reason I do a lot of this work ahead of looking at the next part, which is going to be structure, for me I call it structure and then terms, is so that I have all of this background legwork out of the way that I don't need to dive straight into the text. I can use commentaries or other resources, but don't worry if you don't have access to commentaries, scholarly ones. I'll mention stuff that's totally free, like the Bible Project and other things for you. Trusted resources that you can access for free and be able to use these to help you. Now, we also have some resources on our website, which we've talked about before. There's some of Logos Bible Software's apps. and I don't remember exactly which ones they are, but I'll put a link to that as well.
Yes, if you want to use it but don't know where to find it, please let us know. We will make it very easy for you to access it and learn how to use it too.
I think on our drop-down menu on our website, it's just one of the... I think the menu item is actually apps or Bible software, something like that. But we'll put a link to it anyway, so don't worry.
Yeah, okay, awesome.
And if you're watching this on Faith Life TV, you're already there. You know how to get access to all of that material, so don't worry about it. So anyway, let me get into structure a little bit. So structure for me, when I'm looking at that, is I'm thinking of the thought. I'm going to be doing thought flow analysis after. Oh, let me back up. This is where now, at this point, I'm going to pick up my Bible once I've done all that background. And I'm assuming I already have a passage, by the way. I've picked a verse or two or a paragraph, assuming you're using a Bible that has paragraph divisions. And I am going to say, okay, this is what I want to exegete or study. I would always recommend trying to do a whole paragraph, because that way you're going to get the context. But if for some reason you want to do a verse, totally fine. And then I'm going to take that verse, I'm going to grab my Bible, and I'm going to read it over and over and over again. If it's a Pauline epistle, I might read the whole book, like Galatians or Ephesians. I may read the whole thing over and over and over.
Epistles,
yeah, I do.
Of course.
Yeah, I do.
You're going to want to do that.
It's very didactic for me. He's very practical and pragmatic, sort of. So for me, I love that. We read the Old Testament too. It's not. Don't think I'm a New Testament snob or something. I love all of it.
But,
you have to have both.
You said that if you want to just read one passage, that's okay. Just read it. Passage, I mean one verse over and over, that's okay. If they do that though, how do they get the context?
Yeah, so you're going to go back later on and go into context about the next steps if you're just doing a verse. That's a great question. See, that's why I keep you around. So no, she keeps me around. Don't get confused. So the deal is that what you're going to do next in your context after you've done that is you're going to be reading. There's a few other steps, but going to your question.
You definitely want to eventually read the surrounding text, right?
Right. So the next step in context, one of the next steps, is to read the preceding and the verses after what follows. Yeah. And you sort of go bigger and bigger and bigger. If you can do, again, the whole letter, if it's a Pauline epistle like Galatians or Ephesians, great. If you're Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, I can completely understand that may be a bit much, but that's where that Bible project comes in.
Right, so you can read.
Because you know what the surrounding areas are about anyway. So
through this memorization of Romans we've been doing, I find it super helpful to read the entire book. Yeah. And it's not that long. Most of the books of the Bible are not that long, so you can definitely read the whole thing in one sitting. And if you can, I think it's awesome to read the other book from the same author too, if possible. And
in context study, if it's quoting an Old Testament passage,
I'm
going to go read that.
All the time.
I have a book by, who did that? New Testament quotes of the Old Testament. I think it's D.A. Carson and somebody else. I might have the authors wrong. I'll try to figure that one out. I'll put a link to that as well if I can remember all these links. But a great resource. So the New Testament quotes the Old Testament all over the place. And in fact, there's a lot of criticism leveled at those quotations often because people don't understand when they see the wording slightly different. That's
right, because language is different.
Right. So if you're quoting from Greek to English or Hebrew to English, translation issues could arise there, two totally different languages. However, it's also the fact that New Testament writer is probably quoting from the Septuagint, which is a Koine Greek translation of the Old Testament. So it's Old Testament in Koine Greek. So the whole, basically, if you have that Septuagint and a Greek New Testament, you've got the whole Bible in Koine Greek. So that's where you can get differences. But again, it's propositional knowledge is what we're trying to convey. As you start to learn to translate and interpret things, you learn very quickly that there's two different methods of translation. And Erika actually does do projects for translating Japanese movies. Some of my favorite ones, Jidaigeki films, if you don't know what those are, sort of like sword fighting or samurai films is what Westerners, She does the subtitles for some very, very large ones for, is it Samurai DVD?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway.
Awesome people. If you love that kind of stuff, I recommend it.
Yeah, and the
Great.
cool thing I like about it is generally they're pretty clean films, so I don't have to worry about skipping or using any type of.
It's kind of like
blocker.
watching Western film.
Yeah. I remember.
We might be getting off
Yeah, sorry. Sorry. All right, let's get back to the point.
We're not talking about it, but
Yeah.
you know.
So anyway, back on the topic of translating, right, is that what you're trying to get across is that propositional content. Like we talked about in one of our other videos, propositional content is the idea underneath the text. So again, snow is white in English or in Japanese,
雪は白い。
right, or in any other language. The propositional content is still this icy, cold stuff that falls from the sky, has the color of that, right, of a cloud. That's the propositional content. So dynamic equivalence sort of gets just the general idea across, while formal equivalence tries to translate it as word for word as possible. And again, the problem with that is when you're dealing with different languages, it can get confusing. So, going slowly back on topic here, you can sort of see how that can kind of help. So context, again, if you're just doing one verse, you want the preceding verses and the verses that follow, and you sort of get as large as you can in that. Also read in different translations, because what that's going to do is it's going to give you, see, I use Logos Bible software. I know I say that in all the videos.
It's easy, and I use the Bible app, U version, I think is how it's called.
Yeah.
And Sean always tells me, you're not using Logos. I put it on your phone, but use whatever you want. But whatever app you use is great, because, you know, physical book is wonderful, but it's going to be bulky.
Yeah,
So-
particularly when you're trying to open up multiple translations. I think there's Bible.org has got the NET Bible, but then there's another one, Bible Gateway, where you
there are
can...
lots,
Yeah, you can look up...
You can Google it, it's going to show up for you. So you can compare each translation. And I find it helpful to go for your favorite, but also something totally different from that one. You know what I mean? So if it's very traditional, like King James, then maybe go for something more, how would you say, more of a dialogue that we might use.
So dynamic equivalent would be
Right.
something that is very, very loose. It's more of a paraphrase versus
so
a real woody...
that way you kind of get the variation. And
Yeah.
Do you do that? I think
do.
you do that too.
Yeah, I do. In fact,
Purposely choose something totally different.
when I do text comparisons, I intentionally do that. I have several very formal translations. I'll use King James. I'll use the ESV, my primary one, an ASB, another great one, ASV, RSV, and then I'll start to slowly go more dynamic. And NET, and then I'll start to go more dynamic.
Sometimes I look up in Japanese.
Yeah.
So
And
it's fun.
The reason for this is keywords will stand out. You'll find that in most of those translations, and the Logos Bible software is great because it highlights them or shows you which ones are different. You'll start to notice that there's only, generally speaking, depending on the size of the verse or verses you're looking at, one or two words in that passage that are different. Note that, and then you'll go back, and that'll be where you use a concordance or something. That's going to give you your keyword study. Now, there is a ton of observational techniques we're going to discuss in this part, and probably in our whole course, the thrust of it is on this part of observation, because it's going to aid you in understanding what's going on in the text. They're looking at things that are different, things that are the same. There's tons of different. This book by John Phillips, who's passed away a few years ago, Bible Explorer's Guide. I don't know if it's still being published. It probably is. It just may have a different a different cover rather. You've got looking at the law of context, survey principle, the importance of structure, dispensation, covenants, things that differ, the obscurity rule, interpreting types, parables, prophecy, mention, the law of first mention, or different laws of mention. All kinds of observational techniques, and again, the book that we talked about at first, Dr. Hendrick's book, is just phenomenal for that, for the observation side. So we'll be diving in a lot on that. And then we're going to be talking about, so we've got structure there, a lot of different things, and terms. That's also in structure is going to be sentence structure. So I started to mention these. It's going to be your thought analysis, syntax, figurative language. You're going to revisit context of the passage, immediate and otherwise, just meaning, the before and after, the verses before and after. And don't let some of this stuff freak you out. The cool thing is with syntax, that's really just what do the words mean in the sentence in the verse, if that makes sense. And the diagramming isn't English.
Nobody likes those,
No, I hate
except for
diagramming.
selected few.
Yeah, there's some folks that like it, but most
Right.
people who do it end up saying, I just diagrammed a sentence to tell me what the structure was, but most people, it doesn't add a whole lot.
Yeah, actually, people who enjoy diagramming, they already know, so they don't have to.
Right, exactly. They can read it and go, oh, that's the preposition, this is the article.
We are not going to do diagramming. right?
No. This is a thought flow analysis or bracketing. Sometimes also there are different names for it.
Oh, okay.
But you're just sort of getting the syntax of or the idea of what are the different ideas, I guess, going on in there. I'm trying to think of a real easy way to explain it.
Are you saying just observing the sentence structure?
No, this is bigger. The different propositions and how they're supporting one another, their roles. So I might have a proposition that God so loved the world. And what supports that? Well, he loved it so much that he gave his only son. And how do those fit? Does one support another? Are there keywords that are that this part is explaining it? We've talked about this in our own study. Paul in Romans has a lot of parenthetical comments, meaning a comment that you could put parentheses around. It's sort of not. I do this a lot when I talk in the videos, where I give you some subtext that supports the main idea. It's what I'm doing right now, right? And if you put it in parentheses, if you were writing, it would be the idea, a parenthetical comment, more or less. And so, what Paul does that a lot in his writings, where if you were to put brackets around that, you could skip it, and the flow of the idea would still make sense. Now, I'm not suggesting you do skip it. What I'm saying is that's how you can tell if that makes sense.
So are you saying what's the main idea? Which idea is the sub-idea? That
Right,
kind of
yeah.
Okay,
And what are the
I got
supporting
you.
ideas?
So,
What are the
but-
sub-ideas?
yes,
Are there parenthetical ideas?
With the Bible, I find it a little more challenging. Until you get used to that.
Yeah.
Because it's written so different from our usual everyday conversation or emails. Because in the book of Romans, in ESV, there are so many for. Everything starts with for.
Yeah.
So different.
And therefore, why is it therefore, right? What is it there for? So it's there for something, and we'll talk about that. And I know there are those of you, again, exegetes and college-trained theologians that are going to say, "Oh, duh, Brother Sean, this is how you explain that," and it's escaping me right now. I don't know if it's because I'm on film or I'm hungry or what's going on here, but I can't remember. There's a better way to explain that, but you hit it. You hit the nail on the head. So then we get terms, again, getting into those keywords, and we'll talk about how to identify the keywords. You don't need to define every word in the paragraph. I see this oftentimes with preachers where they, she's letting me know the time's getting close, so they define words that don't really help fellow pastors, that don't help anything in the sermon. It's just, this is what this means in Greek, and here's the tense, voice, and mood. And you go, okay, but what does that have to do with the sermon? And it may not have much, or they just didn't carry over the why they're defining it. So it doesn't carry the force of the argument that they intended for it to do. And then, so that's the first two sections alone. That's observe, orient, and I'll talk about, if you didn't catch how those work right now. And then next video we'll talk about, I can't believe we're running out of time, we'll talk about the decide and act and what falls into those. Most people don't do the rest of this in Bible study methods. Okay.
Wait, how far do they get?
They do these, and then they generally do
Just these two?
they'll do observation, interpretation, and application, but they don't do it the way exegetes do. But we're going to do it the way exegetes do. I'm going to show you guys how to do it. It's just going to be from a version where if you don't have heavy levels of training, you can use different resources that are trustworthy that will help you to do that. So I'll show you, talk you through how to do it. But again, the main thrust of these videos are observation, observation, observation. So we're going to be parking in that orient part. So the observation part is our text criticism, literary form, and big, broad picture context. Big picture context. You see, those are all very large things, right? At least the way I think of them in my mind. I can approach those things outside the Bible. granted, they're all about the Bible. They're all supporting or things that are talking about it in the text, but they're very big picture ideas. Then we start to narrow down. We focus on the text itself, and so that's why I'm using that for orient. And we're going from the verse and its surrounding context all the way down to word studies, which are the smallest unit we can get to. So we're going from the very large picture down to the small. So observe, smaller and smaller things, and then orient. Then what we're going to do is basically, like an hourglass, go back out to application eventually. That's the idea. So we're going from observation to interpretation to application. Now with that, we'll get into theology of biblical, historical, and systematic theology. Most people don't realize why those are important or how they work in this, and they sometimes criticize others for using historical theology. I see that all the time. But used properly, it's a tool of exegesis, believe it or not. It's there to help. And then getting into the different methods of the application from there. There are some other things I haven't mentioned, so don't worry. I just wanted to sort of give a brief overview, and I've only given one of observation and orientation, and we really haven't dived into the other two.
I found it very interesting. And observation is important because if you're not getting, and of course, all of these important observation and orient is what helps you see the material. So it's important to get the right thing out, right? I was just thinking about how people draw, and I feel like one of the way to be a good artist is to observe. Because if you're not seeing what you're drawing, but if you're not picturing what you're drawing in your head clearly, you can't quite draw, right? Like if you draw a cat, it's like, oh wait, how did its nose look like? How does the whisker look like? But if you see it, and if you can really figure out what to look for features, then you get to draw pretty good cat picture. I find so.
Apparently, I'm terrible at that because I'm a stick figure kind of guy. She's an artist. She's actually a decent artist. I'm not.
I love your stick figure things.
I do. Seriously, I have a little whiteboard. I have several whiteboards, but I have a little one that I use when we're doing our Bible study, and I'll diagram out things so that because I'm kinesthetic, tactile learner, and visual. It helps me to explain what I'm trying to say to Erika, and I go, this is what I'm talking about. She's like, oh, I see.
You should have a whiteboard right here.
Yeah, maybe. Most videos I see that do that, it doesn't turn out well because the distance isn't right, and maybe we'll do a little of that. We'll see. So now, I do love the Bible. What are those guys? The ones, Bible Project, because they illustrate everything in really cool form.
It's cute pictures.
Yes, and they do that kind of thing well. I do not. So one other thing I want to mention here, and I'll try to sort of bring this to the forefront later on. Again, because I'm just trying to give an overview, this isn't really detailed, and it may feel kind of overwhelming. Don't worry. As we get in and start doing these things, I'm going to give you a systematic to this so that you have a flow of what to look for, specific things, and how to look for them, so that you have a system in place. So that, like the folks I was talking about with their observation methods and situational awareness, it's not just look for the exits and scary people or people that are muscular or might be carrying a gun. It's much more specific than that. So that's the idea here. In order for us to be able to not only glean the most from our Bible study, but to keep us from committing eisegesis or imposing things on the text that don't belong, creating bad theology. That's really what that does, and that's a bad thing. That's where you get a lot of cults from and really bizarre teachings. And
or many atheist people claim, or you probably heard some of the people say, the Bible says this and it doesn't make sense. It contradicts with other passage, and you want to know for your first hand yourself, what does it really say, right? Instead of that guy telling you what it is about.
And generally that's just bad exegesis. Right. And some people, a very small majority, might be doing it intentionally to try to throw people off or confuse them or whatever. But most genuinely believe what they're reading, and they're just not exegeting the passage correctly. And really it comes down to observation. If you're really doing observation well, reading around the passage, you get the context pretty quick. One other thing is that context is king, folks. You can't see it on my notepad here probably, but I even put that. Remember, context is king, and drew a little king's crown on top there. It's I'm a goofball, but it's you'll hear that if you study, and those of you seminarians and whatnot, Bible college students, you've heard that. You're smiling, you're laughing because you're like, yeah, that's come on, man, it's first day one, right, of these courses. And we'll talk about all the different contexts that there are, but that's really true. So one last thing is that interpretation will come, like I said, in the middle, and that's also can be overlooked. I guess really anytime you overlook any portion of good exegesis, you're going to run into problems. Just like a doctor performing surgery, if the anesthesia, which is the first portion, that guy doesn't do his job right, the rest of it's going to go really badly.
Yeah.
If any one part of that operation is neglected, it's going to go badly, one way or another. Even all the way at the end, we've all heard stories, or if you haven't, there are stories out there on the internet of people having surgical implements left inside them.
Scary.
Yeah, and so they have to go back and be removed. Yeah.
How does it happen?
There's I think it's the Snickers commercial where the doctor's talking to the guy and his cell phone he accidentally put his cell phone in the guy.
Because he was eating Snickers.
He didn't. He was hungry and he didn't eat.
Oh,
and
he
so
should have
he should have
eaten.
eaten. Yeah, it's a Snickers. I think it's a Snickers commercial.
Yes.
Hilarious. Anyway, and so there, that observation is critically important, and doing every step is just as important. So you'll hear me say, we're focusing on this, we're focusing on that. The truth is, we're going to try to pay equal attention to everything, and really try to make sure that all of you are well balanced in this series. And this series could take a whole year to get through, because we're going to try to give you as much detail as we can and through the process. That way you can interpret that data, because that's one thing I also see is that interpretation is not done correctly, and people have all this data. Again, example are sermons where you'll hear pastors giving all this background data, and then you're like, okay, what? And it's not tied into the sermon at all. So it's just sort of like, let me get this out of the way because that's what everyone else is doing. And now when I preach, the main thrust of the sermon, because it's not being tied together well, the listener doesn't know what to do with that information.
Right. How did you come to that conclusion?
Right. Like I got this, okay, so Peter was a fisherman, and then Peter did this thing over here. How does that tie in? Jesus stills the storm. Well, that ties in because these guys, when they say they're scared, that they're going to die, these are men, most of these men were fishermen.
Professional.
They're professional. They live on the water. I'm quite certain most of them could swim. I'm also, maybe you can find some data that would refute that, and that's fine. But they're definitely used to being on the water in storms and otherwise. They know how to handle themselves. So when they say they're scared because this is a storm, this is something serious going on. It's not just a small little squall that's blown through and the water's sort of mamby-pamby kind of splashing in around them. This is serious. And so paying attention to those kinds of things, that's how some background data of Peter being a fisherman and any of the other disciples being fishermen tie into a passage like that. So you don't just want to say they're fishermen, you want to tie it in and relate it to how does that apply to the text. So, again, that all of it becomes important. So, all right, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope not only will it be helpful, but as it launches us into this Bible awareness, if you will, right? Situational awareness of the Bible, whatever we're going to call it, that it helps you. Any closing comments?
No, I think it was fun.
All right. So, hey, thanks for listening. We appreciate it. As always, subscribe, hit that like button. It really helps us if you're watching on YouTube. We could use it because if you don't like what we're saying, eventually it'll help us to be able to interact with you. We can do live things.
Please subscribe. That way you get to see what happens next. Right?
That'll work, yeah.
What was it? Decide. Act.
The observe, orient, decide, and act. Yeah.
Yes, so
there you
subscribe.
go. All right, guys. Take care. God bless.